Hi, my name is Brendan, and for this week's discussion post, I'll be discussing some of the background research for my dissertation. So, like I'm sure all of you guys are doing, I'm using a lot of the research I've done in some of my previous classes as a foundation for my dissertation. And so, what I plan on doing my dissertation on is on one of the oldest aspects of mankind, which is slavery, which has been found in virtually every culture at one point or another throughout history. Yet, one of the most notorious slave trades was that of the transatlantic. In the United States, the origins of this slave trade can be traced back to colonial Virginia and their slave system. The United States has come under a lot of scrutiny over recent years over their participation in slavery and about whether or not it was founded on the concept of slavery and particularly that of its founder, one of its founders, Thomas Jefferson, and his beliefs in natural rights and his Declaration of Independence being contradictory. So the concept of natural rights, life, liberty, and property, are recognized as inalienable rights in the 17th century. So natural rights were not bestowed upon individuals by the governments, but rather by God, and thus cannot be taken away or given to by an institution. And these are going to be first promulgated by John Locke, who, and later Thomas Jefferson, who believes that John Locke actually was one of the most influential people in history. So the emphasis on what we're going to do, our thesis is if Jefferson truly did believe in the concept of natural rights, such as liberty, why was he not only a beneficiary of slavery, but also a proponent of slavery, which is a direct contradiction of liberty? And of this, can we figure out whether or not the United States was actually founded on slavery? And so, in order to properly answer this question, we have to not only look into the creation of the United States, but also in the creation of the 13 colonies as well, and how the founders themselves felt about slavery to feel if the United States was truly built on the institution of slavery. So there are several layers to this question that we need first. First is understanding analyze Jefferson's understanding of natural rights. And to do that, we need to look to the originator, John Locke. And so part of the research is going to be analyzing John Locke's influence in Thomas Jefferson and that of the founders. Right? John Locke once said that of property, of natural rights, he describes slavery is so vile and miserable in a state of man, and so directly opposite to the generous temper and courage of our nation, that 'tis hardly to be conceived that an Englishman, much less a gentleman, should plead for it. And this is taken directly from his two treaties of government. And even though that is not to suggest that Locke himself was against slavery, he should believe that it should have been a form of punishment for crimes committed when no central political authority just exists. And so another layer of this is going to be Caroline Cundiff writes in her dissertation that as more archival evidence became available on the foundations of Carolina, who John Locke himself was actually a part of, the documents revealed that how Locke was involved in the creation of the colony, specifically in his correspondence with the Lord Proprietors and their colleagues in his composition of the Fundamental Constitution of Carolina. These colonial documents describe the founding principles of Carolina, including the practice of slavery and the extent of rights provided to enslavers and enslaved. Scholars have noticed the initial inconsistency of this practice because Locke outright believed that slavery was vile and miserable. And so another layer is going to be how each of the colonies were formed. So we talked about the Carolinas. Now, what about Virginia? Virginia probably did more than the other colonies to help promulgate the slave trade, specifically the transatlantic slave trade. And so as the epicenter of slavery for 13 colonies, Virginia faces numerous hardships, such as disease and starvation, which makes it very difficult to have a proper labor force. And so we need to analyze this labor force and why it was so difficult for them to have laborers and why they're going to switch over from indentured servants over to slavery. A lot of the pressure comes from the supply and demand, that there was such a high demand for laborers, but there's no laborers coming over. And this has a lot of what's going on over in Virginia as well. And how does that relate to slavery? So, according to Terry, I'm definitely going to say his name wrong, Turrigalio Farney, that before 1660 in Virginia, there existed no real codified law mandating African slavery, though the right of protection for slave owners existed under the English common law of property. So the servants that were in Virginia were bound by contracts that exacted long terms of service in exchange for the transportation from Virginia. And according to Dr. T.H. Breen from Northwestern University, beginning in the 1650s, indentured servants flooded to Virginia at a faster rate than ever before. However, as time progressed, multiple factors would come into play on that contributed to the shortage of this labor. The situation in England changed. Declining birth rates led to fewer workers competing for jobs, leading to wage increases. Additionally, compared to other colonies such as Pennsylvania or the Carolinas, Virginia did seem to attract more opportunities. So this is the beginning stages of the research, is looking into the founding of each of the colonies and how did they rely on slave labor. Virginia obviously is going to rely on slave labor a lot differently than, say, Massachusetts, which is where my research is going to go next, is how was the slave trade over in Massachusetts, to truly understand whether or not the United States was founded on the institution of slavery. Thank you. Have a good day.